Abiotic disorders are caused by living organisms including pathogens, nematodes, insects, parasitic plants, and animals. Damage from biotic agents tends to be non-uniform. Usually, one type of plant is affected, although there are exceptions. Most biotic agents leave behind signs such as eggs, excrement, or fruiting bodies that can be a clue to their identification. As global commerce and travel have increased, the importation of non-native species of insects, diseases, and even invasive plants is becoming a bigger issue. For example, when an invasive pest is introduced to an area, the native species may have no resistance, and there may be no natural predators or parasites to control the pest. Pests that might kill only stressed plants in their native land can sometimes attack and kill healthy plants in a new country. It is not possible within the scope of this CD-ROM to cover all of the specific pests and diseases of all plants in all geographic areas. Instead, the various biotic stressors are divided into groups, and their fundamental characteristics are discussed. Some specific examples are given to illustrate principal points. Arborists must become familiar with the primary pests of trees in their area. Objectives: become familiar with the various types of insects and other pests of trees. Be able to match patterns of damage with insect types. Understand the plant disease triangle and the factors necessary for plant diseases. Differentiate among disease types, plant parts affected, and severity of damage. At any given time, there may be several species of insects present on a tree. Only a few, if any, may be harmful. However, almost every species of tree has at least one insect pest that can cause some problems. Some insects, Japanese beetle, aphids, and some scales, will feed on a variety of host plants, while others are specific to certain hosts. Insects have complex life cycles. One stage may cause problems, while the next does not. Knowledge of the pest's life cycles is important in identification and treatment. Some insects are predators or parasites of harmful insects. An arborist must be able to identify both harmful and beneficial insects and know the extent of damage the plant can tolerate before any control is necessary. Reference books and diagnostic labs should be used when needed. Most insect damage to trees is the result of either feeding or egg-laying activity. For example, periodical cicadas can destroy small twigs by ovipositing, laying eggs, in long lines under the bark. Because cicadas may be present in such large numbers, this wounding can be a significant problem during years when large cicada broods emerge. Insect feeding damage is characterized by the type of mouth parts the insect has. Insects such as caterpillars, webworms, beetles, and weevils chew on plant parts. Chewing insects eat plant tissue such as leaves, flowers, buds, and twigs. Some insects, such as gypsy moths, eastern tent caterpillars, and cankerworms, eat the entire leaf. Others may feed between the leaf surfaces or only along the leaf margin. Insects with chewing mouthparts include beetles, caterpillars, grasshoppers, and weevils, among others. Chewing insects physically remove portions of leaves and/or flowers directly or even consume entire plant parts. Click on the play button to watch a chewing insect in action.
Insects that feed on the leaves of plants need to chew the tough fibers before swallowing them. These insects have what we call chewing mouthparts.
Other insects feed by piercing and sucking. Aphids, adelgids, scales, leafhoppers, and true bugs feed by piercing plant cells and sucking out the contents. Symptoms of this type of feeding include chlorosis, stippling, drooping, distortion, and the growth of sooty mold fungus. A few of these insects can also cause phytotoxic effects as a result of chemicals they secrete into the plant while feeding. Generally, while most sap or leaf-feeding insects do not kill trees outright, they can be an additional stress factor and can affect the aesthetics of the tree. Insects with piercing and sucking mouthparts include aphids, whiteflies, and soft scales, among others. These insects insert their mouthparts into the vascular tissues of plants and extract plant fluids. This may result in plant stunting, wilting, and distortion leaves. Some of these insects may use their piercing, sucking mouthparts to penetrate the outer covering of another insect and feed upon its internal fluids. Click on the play button to watch a piercing and sucking insect in action.
Some insects have pointed hollow mouths that work like a drinking straw. They stab their food first and draw the juices out from it. These insects have piercing, sucking mouthparts.
Borers are chewing insect larvae that tunnel under the bark and often into the wood of trees. Because each kind has its own style and tunnel pattern, borers may be identified by their work even after they have left the scene. Trees infested with borers typically show a thinning crown and a decline in vigor. Conclusive signs are small emergence holes in the trunk or branches with frass, semi-digested wood. Borers eat the inner bark, phloem, cambium, or xylem, thereby destroying the tree's ability to transport water and nutrients between the roots and shoots. Some borers, like the Asian longhorned beetle, tunnel into the wood of the plant and cause structural damage. Other insects are classified as defoliators. Defoliation can dramatically decrease tree resistance to trunk-invading organisms such as wood borers, cankers, and vascular wilt diseases. The reduction in photosynthetic area causes the tree to draw on energy reserves to maintain growth, weakening its defense. Time of year can also be a factor with defoliation and may dictate how severely the tree is impacted. Some insects, such as the Japanese beetle, eat only the interveinal tissue, creating a skeletonized leaf, photo on the left. Other insects, such as the elm leaf beetle, create what is called a window pane effect because they eat the interveinal tissue but leave the epidermal layer, photo on the right. Leaf notching is a distinctive type of defoliation caused by black vine weevils and their relatives. These beetles remove tissue from the leaf edge and leave a characteristic notch. Leaf miners are immature larvae of beetles, flies, wasps, and other insects that feed between the upper and lower leaf surfaces, creating tunnels inside the leaves. This process, known as leaf mining, causes a distinctive discoloration in one of two patterns: serpentine mines or blotch mines. Serpentine leaf mines are snake-like, while blotch mines have an irregular shape. Certain insects, such as aphids, pierce into the vascular system of the plant and feed on the sap. These insects remove elements from the sap and excrete the remaining compounds in a liquid form called honeydew. Honeydew can become a problem in large amounts by attracting wasps, ants, and other insects, coating surfaces below the tree in a sticky sap, and providing a medium for the growth of sooty mold fungus. Mites are close relatives of insects, but are actually arachnids, as are spiders and ticks. The mites that cause significant damage to woody plants are very small, and a hand lens is usually required for identification. There are many species of mites. Some species, such as the spider mite, discolor leaves by extracting leaf fluids, resulting in symptoms similar to other sucking insects. Other mites are gall producers. Not all mites are harmful to woody plants. In fact, some mites prey on other mites in the landscape. Another group of common plant pests is nematodes. Nematodes are small, often microscopic, worm-like creatures. Hundreds of species exist, but not all are harmful to plants. Some nematodes are important promoters of organic decay. Nematodes most commonly attack the root system of the plant, although they can damage any part of the plant. Symptoms of nematode feeding include swelling, deformation, galls, stunting, chlorosis, and wilting. Nematodes can also be vectors of other pathogens. When animals feed on bark tissue and phloem tissues beneath the bark on the stems and branches, the tree can be girdled. When the phloem tissue is damaged, it disrupts the translocation of photosynthates, which can lead to the death of localized foliage or the entire canopy if the trunk has been completely girdled. The absence of bark removes the protective covering and allows for the entry of pathogens and insects. Woodpecker and sapsucker damage is fairly easy to identify, although it can be confused with borer damage. Woodpecker holes are quite large and usually random and are caused when the bird drills into trees in search of borers or other insects. Sapsuckers bore a series of smaller holes in horizontal or vertical rows in order to feed off sap and insects. Usually this feeding does not significantly injure the tree. However, trees that are repeatedly damaged may begin to show stress symptoms. Deer browse on buds, twigs, and leaves of woody plants, destroying new growth and permanently deforming shrubs and trees. Deer feeding looks jagged or torn compared to the clean-cut feeding of rabbits and rodents. Deer feeding also occurs higher on the plant. During the winter, when food runs short, squirrels may chew the bark of some species. In the spring, squirrels prefer swelling tree buds. Squirrels can also be a problem if an arborist is working in a tree because they nest in trees and can be hazardous for those climbing or working in bucket trucks. Rabbits, voles, and other small mammals can damage and kill valuable trees and plants by gnawing on bark and clipping off leaves and stems. Damage is especially severe in the winter during long periods of snow cover. Young plants and trees can be completely clipped off at the snow height, while older trees can be girdled, which will eventually kill the plant. The character of the bark influences browsing. Species with smooth, thin bark are preferred over thick, rough-barked species. Trees and associated plants provide shelter and food for a variety of birds and small animals. Nowadays, clients are more aware of the need for wildlife habitat preservation. Therefore, arborists should target only nuisance animals when prescribing control solutions to avoid tree damage. For example, if rodents are a problem during the winter, do not leave coarse layers of mulch around the trees. In addition, or alternatively, place a protective plastic sleeve around the lower trunk. Beavers feed on a wide variety of plants, especially leaves, young twigs, and the inner bark of older trees. Beavers can also harm trees indirectly when they colonize areas and dam waterways, flooding large areas of land. If the existing vegetation remains submerged, it usually dies.